Hi, Richard here. Just thought I'd try to do a little tree made out of old electrical wire. For something like this, you can use old wire, basically a cable, something you can strip down for getting all the copper from inside. You could probably get this from an old installation. You may have done some renovating, so you may have some of this wire like from lamps or something from the wall. So you could use something like this. You're also going to need some wire cutters. Pliers are optional. If the wire is flexible enough, you can work this without needing any other pliers. But basically some simple wire cutters will do. Also, in case your cable hasn't been stripped, you can use a blade to strip it, or if you have an actual wire stripper, you can use that in order to get rid of all the plastic around the wire and cable. Okay. To start with, we're gonna need a certain length of cable. Depending on the thickness of your cable, you might be able to, or also depending on the size and thickness of the tree you want to do. We could start, for instance, in this case, with a length about maybe 3 or 4 feet, about a meter or so of cable. So that's about 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do it at 5. 5 quick lengths, something like 5 feet. Basically, just simply cut it down to the size you need. There we go. And set this to the side. Okay, next step is basically we got to strip the wire. In this case, the cable is like a double cable joined in the center. So basically what we need to do here is try to cut it here. If we're going to separate it first to make it easier, just start out the cut in between the two sheaths and pull it apart. Okay. Follow this through the whole cable. Now, when stripping the cable, we can do it in various ways. I guess whatever is most comfortable for you. Most people say, we're going to join it for an electrical project, so they just simply strip a little bit and twist the end. We're not going to twist the cable yet, but we can try to, let's say, grab a few inches and try to cut it. Careful with your sharp blade. Cut it down the center. This is where an actual wire cutter or wire stripper. There's some wire strippers that have already like a little blade you just run the cable through. Try to gut it down the center so you can open it up. In this case, you can't see it. If you can, try to slit through the whole length of the cable. That might make it easier. But if you can't, or it's a little difficult for you, at least get it started to the point in which you can get it to the end, and you can start pulling out the cable. We're not going to really pull out the cable. What we're going to do, in fact, I'm going to cut it a little bit. I'm going to slice it through here. There we go. Some of you might find that a little easier. So basically I'm going to pull out these few strings, these few wires right out of the end here. And if you can slit it right through the whole length of the cable, all the better. Otherwise, gonna have to try and pull it out a little bit like that. Now for this we are going to have to slit right through the whole length as possible. As I said, here's where an actual wire stripper might come in handy. once you have the slit, all you have to do, since this part is already pulled out, just pull it out through the slit. Okay. I'll come back to it in a bit. Okay, I already stripped both sides of the cable. Got a lot of these scraps, just throw them away or in with their... I'm not sure if these can be recycled, so if you figure they can, include it with your recyclables. Otherwise, it's to be thrown out. So basically, these are the two lengths, because remember it's a double cable. Try to get it as clean and knotless, you know, as few as knots as possible. There's a possibility when stripping that some of the wires will break inside, causing that when you pull it, it'll cause little knots, it'll shift. So try to get it more or less clean. We can always try and either integrate it or trim it out, or I don't know, for instance, a little end, you can put it to the side. Probably use that little bit for something else. Okay. Okay, for this little bit, I think I won't use both lengths. I'll just use the one length, and I'll probably do a second little tree with the other one. Okay, now for this, gotta see how big a tree to make. Now, when we are going to do the tree, we're going to be twisting the cable, so it'll probably shorten a bit. So if this length is about 4 feet long, we can probably consider maybe about a foot length to be my ideal. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a simple bend over. For example, let me get rid of this little knot here, it's a little weird. Okay, there we go. I'll just trim that little knot off, get it out of the way. I can probably use that little bit for something else. And I'm just simply going to do a simple division. So I'm going to join this in half. This is what I mean about it getting all knotted. Kind of a mess. You gotta keep an eye on this cable. Well, if not, I can just simply, instead of folding it in half, I can just simply measure out about a foot or a little longer, maybe about a foot and a half. Fold it over like this. I can probably even leave it at slightly different angles or lengths. I'll trim it right here where the little knot is. And cut it over here. It's thin wire, so you do need good clippers. Otherwise the wire will kind of just simply bends and it doesn't really cut. Now this is a relatively thin wire. Some people will use craft wire, the kind of stuff you can get like at a hobby shop, but it could be a little more expensive. This is, I'm just using the old copper wire from a lamp, from an old extension. Save myself a little bit of money. As I said, you don't really need it to be exactly the same length. It could be slightly shorter, slightly longer. So don't worry if it's not exactly the same. In retrospect, I think to cut this kind of wire might be better with some shears. The shears that you might use to cut some sheets of tin, those could come in handy. If they can cut through a thin sheet of steel, they'll cut through copper pretty easy. Okay. Yeah, there. Okay, now I got a little clump of copper already. As I said, try not to twist it along the way. If it gets a little twisted, well, it happens. But try not to twist through the whole thing before we do this step. Okay, so the next step will be to do the actual twisting to make the tree. Okay, now we have these lengths, these shorter lengths. I've got about 6 lengths. If they came out a little mismatched on the length, try grouping them with one side more or less matched. This one can go, yeah, leave it like that. More or less like that. And so one side will be closer matched in their ends. The other one can be a little bit more different. And here's where we're going to start doing the twist. If you want to try and separate them a little bit, try and get them a little like that, because this is going to be the thickness of my little tree. This wire is pretty thin, so it's not very good for a very thick tree or big tree. This is good like for a smaller tree. So I'm going to look for more or less for it to be maybe 1/3 or 1/4 of this length here. Now I'm going to start to twist, but I'm not going to twist right at the end. I'm going to leave a little bit, maybe about 1 inch. Some people will, if the wire is a little thicker and more difficult to manage, they'll clamp it down with one plier here and start twisting with the other, or with the hand. Since this is pretty thin and soft, I'm going to twist it with the hand up to about here. More or less 4 inches or so, maybe a little longer. Yeah, about 4 inches. So here I'm going to start twisting it. Now keep an eye on which direction you're actually twisting in. It'll be better if you always twist all these wires in the same direction. In this sense, I'm twisting it clockwise. Because if you start twisting it or suddenly twisting to the left, you're going to start getting like little, I don't know if you would call them pockets, but they are going to start unraveling later. So more or less about 4 inches, that's about there. So got to twist a little bit more. It's been a long time since I've done one of these, so bear with me. That's about from there to there, still a little bit more. Okay. Try to make the twist kind of tight. That will help a lot for it not to unravel. So it's about there. Keep the twist tight. If you have like a little knot there, you can You can probably use that as an indicator up to where to do the twist. It's gonna be a little flimsy, but for this little demo should work okay. Okay. Okay, so we already have this little bit of a trunk. Now we gotta decide more or less. We already did it up to about here. Then it's a good idea to try and unravel these a little bit, because we're going to start doing sort of like a braid. Well, not quite a braid, more just a simple twist. But it's better if we can mix these wires together so they're not so distinct. Too bad it's such a stiff copper, because, well, it's not that stiff, but it's not so soft and silky like here. Otherwise we could just simply comb it. So just kind of separate the strings, but then the wires a little bit. That's why I was saying don't twist them as you strip them, because otherwise you won't be able to mix them together. So some people will actually try to do this step before doing the twist here. If you're going to do that before doing the trunk twist, then just do a quick twist here so it doesn't all fall apart, and then start basically separating all these wires and letting them intermingle. Okay, now for instance, in this case I'm gonna let this tree go into like 3 different directions. I could probably go 2, but let's go 3. So let's separate these. Imagine you're trying to work with your hair. For instance, girls that might do a little twist in their hair, well, sort of the same thing. You try and separate them. They don't need to be precisely the same. Oh boy, see, this is what I mean about knots. You gotta be careful. You know, in this case, they don't need to be exactly the same amount of wires. I'll probably let that kind of break apart. So just simply clump them together. Look for the clumps. They don't need to be exactly the same. For instance, here we go. If you end up breaking a little bit here and there, not a big deal. So for instance, that's one. That could be another, that could be another. So I'm gonna take advantage of this appearance. They're not going to come out the same, exactly same place. So I can use this part here. And I did this clockwise on the trunk. I'll start twisting these same way clockwise. Now how far am I going to go? I can go maybe about, not as long as the trunk. It's preferable to each time be a little shorter. So maybe between 4, it could be between 3.5 inches or 3. Again, try to keep your twists a little tight. The tighter the twist, the more it'll contract the length, if you want to put it that way. And then these do the same thing, more or less look where it's going to be. Start twisting the same clockwise, because if I do it counterclockwise it might start unraveling this part here. So do it clockwise. Also about maybe that same length about there. In retrospect, I may have chosen a little too flimsy a wire. Should have gone with a slightly thicker caliber. If you got the chance, well, try different ones. Start with small trees. You don't need to go something so big. This should have probably gone with half the size. There we go, and this side here, same thing. Twist it around. Okay. And I already got 3 branches. Once I set these up, they'll be separated. I can bend them to the position I want them. Continue with this one in a bit. Okay, here the next step is basically just repeat. Now from here on you can probably just simply divide in 2, not so much in 3, because trying to divide in 3 can be a little annoying. So just divide this in 2. Can work one main branch at a time. So let's divide this in 2 more or less there. Again, separate these. If you got any broken knots, just simply strip them off. Okay, so for instance in here, it's very easy to get all mixed up here, so be careful. So basically, we're going to repeat this. Remember, each segment would be a little shorter than the one before. Repeat that. Look for the point where you need it. Well, maybe a little bit longer. Now we look to the half. I might end up trimming a little bit of this long wire. For instance, there we go. Okay. And twisting in the same direction. As I said, being a thinner wire, it's going to be a little flimsy. This would have been better for a much smaller little tree. Get rid of that knot. Divide in 2 and twist this. Divide in 2. Try and twist that. Now, for instance, here, this wire is a single wire, so you can probably try to break it or cut it more or less here, for instance, here. And there we go. If you bend metal enough times on a single point, it'll break. So that's a little tactic you can use. Okay, let me see. This is, I can still twist this a little bit more. Okay, and this one. And this one that's being 2, just simply break off or cut off at a certain distance. There we go. Now for the other one, here we go. This one is 4 strings in a sense, so I'm just gonna try and make sure it's all the way down. And the same thing, twist it around. If it's easier for you to separate the two, and then like that with the two separated do the twist, go right ahead. Because it can be very easy to do all the work and not get any twist at all. More or less there. There we go. Good tight twist at the end there. And we're going to break this bit here. As I said, the brakes don't need to be at the same distance. Now for this side here, might try making that one a little longer. Quite a bit of exercise for detail work. Let's see, more or less, I'll try to do this one a little bit longer. Right about there. Break that off and break that off. And basically repeat the steps with all the other branches. You divide them roughly in two, and each time you make it a little shorter, shorter. Okay. I'll try to continue working this and get back to you in a bit. Let's see. Okay, now I've already finished twisting all the branches, all the wires together, broke off all the excess that I didn't need. From here you can basically just shape up the directions of the different branches. One suggestion is the thicker branches, try to keep them more upwards so it looks a little bit more natural. There we go, something like that. Don't let it lay flat, point them in different directions. The longer branches a little more upward, as I said. And there we go. Don't let it be just two-dimensional, let it go in and out, different angles, but always with an upward growth. Otherwise, if it's too heavy going downwards, it'll feel like if it's going to fall. Okay, so that's something here. If you want the main trunk to be a little more sturdy, try to make it a little tighter on the twist. Now, as for this bottom part, this one can be twisted around similar to here, but since these are shorter, divided like in 4 or 5 sections, maybe 7 sections, and twist them around. And these can be like the little like the roots. These can also be used to anchor it among pebbles or some other kind of decorative base. But these little things can work as little roots. Let it sprawl out. As I said, maybe around between 5-7 groups, something like that, depending on the thickness of your trunk. And that'll be your roots. Okay, well, basically that's about it on this little tree. Some people that have tried this have decorated the tree. They'll put like little sequins or beads or other little flakes, something to make it look like if it's got leaves, flowers, stuff like that. Little bits of paper, probably spray some glue, put some flocking around. Let it, but mainly on the points, not so much on the trunk, but mostly on the little branches here. I think some people will try to string up some colored cotton, let some cotton get stuck there. A lot depends on what's easiest for each person to try and simulate foliage. Because right now, well, without leaves, it looks like it could be like an autumn tree or a winter tree. So, yeah, that's an option. Well, this is it for this small little project. I hope this is useful for possible inspiration or ideas for other projects that you might have. So, well, that's about it for now. See you later.